Welcome everybody. I'm glad everybody's been able to join us this evening and welcome you to Inspiring Woodland Creation, where we're going to chat about the incentives and the benefits of woodland creation on farms. I'm the Business Development Advisor for the Southwest, Jo Garlick, and in post to help landowners and advisors with looking at woodland creation opportunities on their land. I'm joined as well today with Rihanna Drury from Natural England, and she's going to chat about sort of landscape issues that you might encounter whilst looking at woodland creation and help you to navigate some of the issues that you might have on your land. So the first section of the presentation is going to be about the benefits, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Forestry Commission grants that are on offer and the sort of the money and the funding that you can access. So we've got on the presentation tonight, there is a live Q&A. So if you have any questions at any point during the presentation, pop them into the live Q&A. You won't be able to see it directly until we publish it, and whilst Rihanna's chatting in her presentation a bit later on, I will publish those questions and Rihanna or myself will look to try and answer some of them after the presentation section. If we don't manage to get to all the questions, we will publish them and send around the answers. Post-event, we'll also publish all the resources, and the presentations will be recorded as well for future use. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully go straight into the presentation. There is a slight delay because we're using Microsoft Teams Live, which both Rihanna and I are new to using, so hopefully we won't have too many technical hitches as we go along. So, woodland creation. So we can't have failed to miss that we're in a climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis. Every day on the news, I think there's a new statistic for both, which is quite frightening, but we can feel quite removed from it. But trees are really important for tackling these two crises that we're facing. And we can use trees to help mitigate against global temperatures increasing, and they can also help to increase biodiversity by creating new habitats. But what I really want to talk to you about is the holistic benefits of woodland creation and actually how they can help farm businesses, whether you want to get an income, a revenue from it, or you want to mitigate some of the issues that are being caused, like runoff, and pollutants, etc. So on the screen, you should be able to see lots of those benefits. Some are direct ones where you can actually get an income from timber and wood fuel, but others you can improve air quality. And I'm going to dig down into some of these in a little bit more detail so you can actually see how it can actually help your farm. So the first ones I'm going to look at is trees and shelter. We know it's unprecedented times with climate change, and we're experiencing some of those conditions already, and the temperatures that we've seen over the last couple of weeks have been remarkable and slightly worrying. And we know that in winters that we're going to get more rain, and in certain situations we're going to farms are going to be struggling with cold stresses. Some of these impacts I'll go through that you'll be hopefully all well aware of because you'll be experiencing them. So we see that cold stress in animals can cause hypothermia, pneumonia, mastitis and poor growth, all of which can reduce productivity and in some cases can also cause fatalities. Certainly when the beast from the east was here, I've never seen so many sheep deaths out on Dartmoor. Also, we have heat stresses, and we know that overheating, particularly in calves and cows, can reduce their grazing, but also reduce their milk yield. So it has a direct impact on your revenues. Waterlogging, again, in the sort of the wet autumn and the springs with the flash floods that we get, can cause lameness, liver flukes and mortality. The number of cows and animals that I've seen stuck in bogs and which have ended up dying has increased over the last few years due to the wet conditions. But trees are amazing. Trees can actually help. They provide that natural source of shelter, not only from heat, but from wind and from rain as well. And certainly last week when we hit above 40 degrees in lots of places, we saw in the fields lots of cows and sheep heading to the hedges, heading to those isolated trees just to get a bit of shade. And they offer loads of other benefits as well. They actually help moderate soil conditions, which can also improve productivity for arable crops, as well as providing that shelter for animals. But types of tree shelters, there's all sorts. It might not just be a whole block of field planting, but actually being a bit more strategic, whether that's riparian, shelter belts or isolated infield trees, or actually blocks within a grazing parcel. I was out at a National Trust site a couple of weeks ago and they'd got a brilliant 2 or 3 fields that they were ranching longhorn cattle through, and they'd planted individual trees through those parcels, but also some strategic small woodland copses in there. And already the function of the trees was providing benefits for the animals. I'm going to look at water quality next. And we know that with climate change, we are getting increased flash floods, which is increasing the amount of runoff, soil erosion, and trees can actually mitigate these effects by some of their amazing processes. It feels a little bit like a biology lesson in some respects, because trees not only store carbon, but they also transpire water from the ground, taking it up through the trunk, and the water then evaporates through the leaves. So one mature tree can actually transpire 2,000 litres of water a day, which is remarkable. And conifer and broadleaf, again, there's a slight variation, but they're all absorbing lots of water from the ground. So how does it help with water quality? So infiltration is much higher under trees than grass, and that's because the trees have really big roots which penetrate deep into the soil. When they decay, which they do as part of the natural life cycle of the trees, they leave open channels, which means instead of the rain just running across the top of the soil, the rain will actually infiltrate down into the ground, which can then be added into the soil and support the grass or the crops that you're growing further down. They can also help with compaction as well, and they can break up compacted ground. So they can be a really useful mechanism for actually addressing some of these issues. And looking in a little bit more detail, we know that agriculture, we know we put nitrates and we put manures and slurries onto our fields to increase productivity, but quite often we can get excesses of those nitrates and phosphates, and when we get the flash floods, even if you've got a slightly sloping field, can easily run off and enter the watercourses. And we know from recent reports that I think every river and tributary has failed on pollution standards, even the ones out on Dartmoor, Bodminmoor, where you think the water quality would be good. There is issues because of nitrates. However, what we've seen from research is that where you plant trees, this runoff and this pollution stops almost immediately within sort of 2 or 3 years. And the graph at the bottom just shows you by year 3 the amount of nitrate going into watercourses almost halves, and then by year 7 and 8 it has completely disappeared. And that is just about strategic planting of woodlands around potentially arable fields to stop that. And it doesn't need to be huge trees, it can be small shrubby trees, but they have a really positive impact. Also, the trees will absorb any of that excess nitrates and use them to help grow. So not only have you stopped pollution, you're actually enabling the trees to grow better. On to the next slide. The next section, I just want to look at ammonia emissions, and the government has pledged to reduce ammonia emissions by 16% by 2030. So we know ammonia comes from all sorts of sources, including farming. So dairy farms are one of the sort of areas where we see the most ammonia emissions, and in particular we can see it in housing and through manure application. So why does the government need to reduce this? Because it has really big impacts on human health and also on nature. In human health, because it can be deposited at a ground level and at a local level, it can cause low birth weights and mortality, but it also contributes to respiratory diseases. It also has a massive impact on nature, particularly lichens and mosses, because they get all their nutrients directly from the air. And this next picture shows a slightly depressing picture of some sphagnum moss, which hopefully you'll all be familiar with. And the right-hand side is some sphagnum moss, which was collected from near a poultry farm where ammonia emissions were high. And you can see it has completely died compared to the healthy sphagnum moss on the left-hand side. And sphagnum moss is really important because it helps the development of peat, and peat is a really big carbon store. So it's really important that we're looking after these mosses and lichens in particular. But trees can help reduce ammonia emissions, and I think in the next 2 or 3 years we'll be seeing more guidelines and restrictions on how much ammonia that farms are allowed to produce. But trees can actually form a really important process to reduce those ammonia emissions. If they're put upwind, so to speak, around housing or slurry lagoons, it actually slows the wind speeds down, which slows and reduces the amount of ammonia emissions taken off the lagoon. So just by putting in a shelter belt or a buffer around them of trees, you can reduce those ammonia emissions. If you put them downwind as well, they perform two functions. They actually capture the ammonia in the form of nitrates and utilise that themselves, but also because of the height and the rough texture of the leaves and the branches, they will actually mix that ammonia emissions up into the atmosphere and in effect diluting it so it doesn't fall onto important habitats like the lichens and mosses. So really important that we're thinking about trees as a measure to reduce ammonia emissions on our farm. And some great statistics. This was some research done by Forest Research and how trees can help and reduce ammonia, and they came up with some great figures. This was after a lot of study and trials, and they saw 15 to 20% reduction in housing emissions, 10 to 20% reduction for slurry lagoons, and 60% reduction for livestock ranging. And I've seen from other organisations as well even better percentages of reduction of ammonia emissions. Now, it can be quite complicated if you are thinking about using trees to reduce ammonia, but there's a great online calculator, so you can actually work out what your ammonia reduction would be by choosing what type of trees you're going to plant, and also the width of your buffer around your slurry lagoon or stocking sheds. So if that's something you're looking into, then I would well recommend having a look at the online calculator, Farm Trees to Air. So the holistic benefits of woodland creation are huge, and they're going to benefit you, the farm, nature and society and the environment, but they need to be carefully planned to make sure they're actually going to deliver your objectives. But we're all here from the Forestry Commission and Natural England to be able to support you in that. What I'm going to talk through next is an overview of the financial incentives out there. It seems to be quite a few out there at the minute, but what the Forestry Commission is trying to do is trying to signpost people to the right grant and the support organisation who can help you with your applications, whatever size of planting that you're considering. But I'm going to chat to you about the Forestry Commission grants that are available at the moment. And there's two main ones that we're going to look at today. The Woodland Creation Planning Grant, or WCPG. And then we're going to look at the England Woodland Creation Offer, UCO as it's termed, and then some additional benefits that you can access through the Woodland Carbon Code. The Woodland Creation Planning Grant is there in place to actually help you do the planning work, particularly if you're in a complex landscape or it is a large scheme. Applications for this are for over 5 hectares. And then you've got the England Woodland Creation Offer, which is for the trees itself and for capital items, and something that you might have heard about already, the public goods and the additional contributions. So I'm going to unpack these two grants initially to give you an understanding what funding is available and what these grants can do. So I'm going to chat about the Woodland Creation Planning Grant. And as I said, it helps with the planning and the thinking of your woodland creation scheme. And through this grant, there's up to £30,000 per site available. And it helps you to think about the constraints and the opportunities, and it helps support any survey work that you might require to make sure the trees are going in the right place. So what it looks like is, I've got the eligibility. So how you enter into this, the minimum application size is 5 hectares for this grant, though if you're underneath that, we do welcome joint applications. So you might have a neighbour who's got 2 hectares and you've got 3, and you're both in a complex landscape, so we can put those applications together so you hit the threshold. There's a minimum block size of 0.5 hectares and a minimum width of 20 metres for the Woodland Creation Planning Grant, but there's no maximum application size or block sizes. Also, you don't need to own or control the land, and the real advantage of the planning grant is there's no real expiry date for the agreement. So once it's in place, you then can apply for UCO at any point, whether that's 2 years' time, 5 years' time, or 10 years' time. If it is the latter 10 years' time, you're waiting that long for things to kind of fall in place, then there might be some amendments need to be done, whether that's sort of engagement with stakeholders. You might need to re-engage with them, but the fundamentals of your plans won't need to be changed. The other benefit as well for the Woodland Creation Planning Grant is that the land can be in an existing grant scheme, such as countryside stewardship, mid-tier or higher tier. So you can apply for this grant regardless of what scheme you are in currently, which can be a real advantage if you've still got a couple of years to go on your stewardship application agreement, or you're waiting for elms to come out, Also with this planning grant, if you have an agreement in place, there is no obligation to plant, which again can be a real benefit, and it gives you that time to get the planning right in line with your farm business and what you're hoping to achieve. So what does the money look like for the Woodland Creation Planning Grant? It's broken down into 2 stages. Stage 1, you submit a stage 1 application, and it basically gives you £1,000 for some desk-based research to identify planting opportunities, and it takes you through the process, the application form. It helps you to identify if there's any important habitats that you need to avoid. It helps you to identify whether there's any water issues, if there's any historic environment issues on your land that need to be worked around or incorporated into your plan. So you do the desk-based research, and then once approved by the Forestry Commission, you'll be given the go-ahead to move on to stage 2. And the stage 2 of the process is basically actually designing your woodland with the constraints that you've identified in stage 1. So if you've looked at, you've got a burial mound on your site, and that's been identified in stage 1, and you create your design around that burial mound. You don't need to necessarily exclude it. You can create that as part of the open space, as part of your woodland. And as part of the process of the planning grant as well, we actually pay for additional money for surveys to completed, because it might be that in stage 1 you identify that actually I've got some grassland that looks quite nice, but I'm not sure if it's species rich and I should be planting here. We'll pay for a grassland survey to be done up to the 70% cost of those surveys. We'll also pay again for bird surveys, historic environment surveys, and sometimes if you're in a sensitive visual landscape, we'll pay for a visual landscape survey to be completed. So also at stage 1, if we discover in the process we need to make amendments, we need to take some parcels out, we can do that, but then you're allowed to actually put in extra parcels. So we can make amendments during this grant application process. So it's a really good idea to actually assess whether the Woodland Creation Planning Grant is the initial first step for you. So what I'm going to move on to next is to chat about the England's Woodland Creation Offer, UCO. Now this grant was brought out last May time, and already we're seeing a huge uptake of this grant because the flexibility of it is really good. Originally, the equivalent grant, you had to have 3 hectares. Now this grant is you just have to have 1 hectare to be able to apply. But again, we allow joint applications. But it provides the platform for you to create a woodland that works for you and your objectives, whether that's timber production, for biodiversity, for landscaping, or for recreation, or for whatever your purposes. UCO should provide you with a good income to be able to support that. So there's quite a bit of money available under UCO, and it is really generous when you compare it to other schemes such as countryside stewardship. So there's kind of 3 elements to the funding, which I will take you through. So there's £8,500 in standard costs or capital items you might be more familiar with. So that's to pay for the trees, for the tree shelters, to pay for fencing to pay for deer fencing, and it aims to cover as much of that cost as possible. So within it, we pay £1.60 per tree, £2 per tree shelter. I think it's £5 at the moment for fencing and £9 a metre for deer fencing. So it's really competitive. So it can actually start to actually pay for those items that you actually need to set your woodland up. The next line of funding that comes through UCO is maintenance payments. It was up until February, March time of this year, £200 per hectare. But they've revised this and have increased it to £300 per hectare per year. Now, this payment is for 10 years of payments. You get that money, and it soon adds up if you've got a couple of hectares going into a scheme. And this money is there to, if you get a few trees that die, it pays for putting new trees in, or if you've got a bit of fencing that needs fixing, then it will pay for that. That's what this maintenance payment is. And you'll find that in the first 2 or 3 years there'll be more establishment costs, but as the trees establish, then the costs reduce and you'll be hopefully making an income from your woodland. The next line of contributions funding is something called additional contributions, and you can have up to £8,000 per hectare, and this is basically what your wood your newly created wood will be providing to the general public. So it's public goods for public benefit. Again, we've heard probably lots of that on the news. And how this is what it looks like. So depending on what your woodland is delivering, you can access these extra payments. So if you're thinking about, for example, creating a native woodland or considering natural regeneration, letting trees develop on their own, there's a biodiversity payment. And if you're in a high area, if you're next to an existing woodland, you can receive £2,800 per hectare. If it's slightly out, not quite near a woodland, there's a payment of £1,100 per hectare. And that just recognising that you're creating really important habitat and supporting biodiversity. There's other payments as well. There's quite a lot around water. So we're paying for, if you're planting trees near rivers or streams, there is a payment to recognise that you're providing benefits for that, £1,600 per hectare. Again, there's one for improved water quality. So if you're reducing runoff, there's a payment of £400 per hectare. And again, there's a flood risk. So if you're in a high flood risk area and you're planting trees, it will help prevent flooding further downstream. And again, there's another payment of £500 per hectare. And then there's the amenity benefits as well. So if you're close to a village or town, there's an extra payment, close to settlements it's called, of £500 per hectare. And again, if you want to open your woodland up to support local people and mental health and well-being, there's an extra £2,200 per hectare. Now, all of these, you can have as many of them, they are stackable. So you can have close to settlements, you can have the biodiversity payment, they can all add in, and they can add up to quite a sizable amount of money for your woodland. Which can be a real bonus. And we have something called the Forestry map browser, where you can actually see your eligibility for these payments and the criteria in that. Though for some, like water quality, if you're not quite in the spatial layer, but you know that actually by planting trees you're going to be reducing runoff, if you get approval from a catchment sensitive farmer, they can endorse the planting of that woodland, so you can access that that extra payment. But all the information is in detail in the manual, but you're more than welcome to chat to me or one of my area team, one of the Woodland officers. But I'll chat to you a bit later on about the support that's available. So it stacks up really, really well, the UCO offer. And can be a really good option, particularly for marginal land or land that's not very productive. It's worthwhile thinking about whether you could put a woodland in there. So there is a little bit of eligibility requirements. So the land must be in England, and I think everybody here tonight is in England, so that's not going to be an issue. The minimum application size is 1 hectare. But we welcome joint applications. So there might be a few of you in the area who could club together to make sure that you hit 1 hectare. But if you're not, we can actually signpost you to other organisations who will support your planting for under 1 hectare. The minimum width is 20 metres per block, and a minimum block size is 0.1 of a hectare. So width-wise, we do allow slightly thinner planting for shelter belts and riparian planting. Also important to note, the land must be free of existing grant schemes, or your existing grant scheme is about to expire. It must have only 6 months or less to go for you to be able to apply for UCO, and that's really important to mention. You can, if you want to, if you are mid-agreement, you can take out your parcels of land from your stewardship scheme and enter into a UCO application, because quite often when you look at the finances, UCO outperforms stewardship payments, particularly around some of the low input grassland options. It also helps the UCO make sure that your woodland is UKFS compliant, which means it's going to not impact on people, it's not going to impact on the historic environment, it's not going to impact on any existing priority habitat, but the grant process actually helps you to make sure that it's UKFS compliant. And also there is another benefit as well if you're interested in getting private finance for your woodland. If you're opening up for recreational purposes and you want to bring in some private investment, UCO allows you to do that, though you wouldn't then be able to access the additional contributions, say, for access. So it's worth looking into, and this is a very emerging market with the private finance. There's a lot of businesses out there wanting to invest in woodlands so they can offset their carbon emissions to hit net zero by whatever point. So I've talked about the 2 main grants, and I want to just touch upon a little bit the Woodland Carbon Code. And again, you might have heard a little bit about the Woodland Carbon Code, and there's a lot of mention about sequestering carbon. So I'm going to unpack this a little bit and help you to understand what the Carbon Code is about. As I mentioned before, trees absorb carbon dioxide and store it. And it's really important, this carbon dioxide, that trees are absorbing it so we can try and mitigate against climate change. So we see that 1 tonne of carbon dioxide is absorbed is equivalent to something called a carbon credit. Now, these carbon credits, once validated, which I'll chat a little bit more about in a moment, can be used to set your own carbon emissions off to reach net zero, or they can actually be sold onto others, onto other businesses and other people who are wanting to offset their emissions. So what the Carbon Code does, it's not run by the Forestry Commission, it's an independent a quality assurance standard, much like the red tractor, to make sure that the standard of carbon units is equal across the country. And what it does, the process, you have to pay to register, but you register your woodland even before it's planted. And then through the Woodland Carbon Code, at various points at the stages of the life of the woodland, the carbon will be validated by the Woodland Carbon Code. An advisor will come out and verify and validate the carbon that your trees have sequestered. And it will give you a number of units. And a typical woodland will, a 50-year-old woodland will be sequestering between 300 to 400 carbon units. And we see that carbon is selling on the open market quite well at the moment, as everybody tries to get to net zero. So once you've got your verified carbon units, you can sell them onto the open market. And we've seen in the last year that carbon units are escalating. The price of them that people are buying for is going up. I think a couple of years ago it was about £7 per unit, and we're now seeing sort of £21 a unit. And we had an auction last May time, and again, though the results haven't been published, we're expecting a big leap in the price of the carbon units that are being sold. Now, if anybody is like me, I get very nervous about stock markets because I don't feel too comfortable with that, because it's dealing with a virtual world. But the government have introduced something called the Woodland Carbon Guarantee, and it's just a bit of security because the government have offered to give you a guaranteed index-linked price until 2055 on those carbon units. So it gives you a bit of security with the carbon units that your woodland is generating. So the woodland carbon is an additional extra to the grants, and actually can give you a more longer term income from your woodland. But there's other revenue opportunities available from your woodland as well, which I'm just going to briefly chatter a little bit about. So Forestry England do this very well. They're sort of commercial timber production, and timber prices again are going up. But you could create a woodland that is focused on timber production. We currently import about 80% of all our timber, and we know that timber supplies are decreasing because of Ukraine and Russia, and as we go into a more greener future, we'll be using more timber products. So there's an opportunity in the market as well for using your wood that you're growing from woodland creation for timber production. Also the wood that can go for saw logs or furniture making, but it also could be sort of the lower quality grade and can be used for biomass boilers. And again, this is an area of the market that is increasing all the time. So there's a lot of opportunity for additional income. I'll also mention there's a lot of income to be had from using your woodland for recreation. We know the challenges that COVID brought and Brexit and the issues of people wanting and needing to be outside more. So there's an opportunity to use your woodland for recreation, again, to make an income, whether that's game shoots, pheasant shooting, whether you want to open bits of your area up for glamping, or you want to run forest schools, or even mountain biking. There's a whole host of different options. And also the government are investing in green social prescribing, because the benefits for people's health, if they've got particular illnesses, will help them to recover. So again, there's opportunities for income through your woodland, through opening your woodland up for recreation. Tax is another slightly thorny issue, but again, there's benefits with creating your woodland, and woodlands are subject to a range of tax relief. So if you are growing a timber crop, you are exempt from capital gains tax, and also the sale of the timber is exempt from income and corporation tax, and under the woodland relief, the value of the woodland can be exempt from inheritance tax. So again, you're not going to be stung to pay tax on your woodland. So all stacked up, it's a really good idea to have a look at what a woodland could bring to your farm. So just to recap, before I hand over to Rihanna, because I know I've covered a lot of information in quite a short space amount of time. We've got the Woodland Creation Planning Grant right at the beginning. You don't have to go through this route, but I would well recommend it if you are considering a large plantation, if you're in a sensitive landscape. You've then got your UCO offer, which helps pay for the goods and the capital items. And then added into that, you can add in the Woodland Carbon Code and the Woodland Carbon Guarantee. Now, I realise I've covered a lot in a short space of time, and you're thinking, actually, I'm a farmer, not a forester. We're here to support you. So my area team in the Southwest, we have a lot of experts on the team. We have experts in treehouse, we have historic advisors, we have people focusing on deer management and squirrel management. We've got people who are experts on timber production, as well as experts on biodiversity and landscapes. So we are here to support you in that process. We are also working with lots of other organisations, such as the Natural England, Woodland Trust, West Country Rivers Trust, lots of community forest organisations as well. And these people we're working closely with, so they can actually help you understand your landscape a bit more and help with the application process, because we realise sometimes it's not as easy as possible. We also have got woodland officers, and we've recruited quite a few more in the last year. So you will be assigned a woodland officer for your area. So if you have got any questions whilst you're applying, you'll be able to contact your woodland officer to navigate the process. And I'm really sort of proud to say that we are a very responsive team. So at any stage of the application, you can talk to somebody via email or on the phone to help resolve your problem. And it's always a two-way process through either of the grants, and we can make amendments during the grant process. But I'll talk a little bit about next steps after Rihanna, but I'm going to welcome Rihanna now, and she's going to chat a little bit about Natural England's part in woodland creation. As some aspects of the process, you will need to engage with Natural England, particularly if you've got slightly sensitive grassland and you want to understand if you can plant there or not. You can engage with Natural England early, which Rihanna is going to chat to you a little bit about. So I'm going to hand over to Rihanna, and then you'll see me back in a few minutes.
Yeah, hello. I'm just going to make sure I can click OK onto the next slides. I'm hoping that's worked, Joe. Yeah, doesn't seem to have clicked, but I'll click again.
If not, I will do it for you.
Yeah, I can't seem to see my, oh, there we go. Was that you doing it for me?
Yeah, that was.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll just say click slide then. Okay.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Rhianna Drury, a senior advisor and one of 4 advisors in the Southwest for the Tree Action Plan delivery team. I'm here to give you just a quick introduction to what is a new function for Natural England, offering advice and support on woodland creation. Next slide, please, Jo. Yeah, so Tree Action Plan delivery team, also known as TAPD, consists of 22 new staff across 10 Natural England areas. We advise on woodland establishment and facilitating an increase in woodland creation rates in England to 10,000 hectares per year by 2025. It's a target set out in the England Tree Action Plan. So there's 2 principal things we do. We want to identify how to maximise the environmental and social benefits from new woodlands, whilst also ensuring that we protect important habitats and avoid impacting any sensitive species or habitats. Next slide, please. So the formation of TAPD came off the back of 2 government policy documents, the 25-year Environment Plan published in 2018 and the England Tree Action Plan published last summer at the same time that the England Woodland Creation Offer grant scheme was opened. So it outlines how government and its arm's length bodies, which includes the Forestry Commission, Natural England and the Environment Agency, will work together to provide funding and guidance to encourage and enable landowners, foresters, managers and communities to establish new woodlands and manage existing woodlands to benefit wildlife, people and the economy. So as a Tree Action Plan advisor, we can offer free ecological advice and guidance for schemes at the earliest stage of a project, whether it's a biodiversity oriented native woodland or if it's a productive mixed conifer scheme which is going to eventually become timber. So we can give advice recognising that we need all sorts of woodland and forest projects to both help nature and help Britain get to a net zero economy. Next slide, please. So to access support, any delivery partners, whether that's farmers, land agents, the Forestry Commission, community forests, charities such as the Wildlife Trust, can contact a new national mailbox, woodlandcreation@naturalengland.org.uk, and the cases will be sent on to the relevant area-based TAPD advisor to process. We have an agreed response timeframe of 20 working days, recognising in the past Natural England has been very under-resourced and not able to get back to our customers as quickly as we'd like. This is like quite an ambitious timeframe for us, and so far we're managing to meet it quite well. Next slide, please. So when you do contact this mailbox, we will send you quite a simple form to fill in. Essentially, it gives us some basic information about the site you are thinking about having woodlands. So the size of the proposal, a grid reference, a bit of information about the purpose of the woodland. So whether it's going to be a native woodland or a productive woodland, you don't have to have it all set in stone, just some ideas that you might have will give us some steer. And also it will say about whether this is an early engagement, so like really just an idea at the moment, or whether you have already talked to the Forestry Commission and applied for something like the Woodland Creation Planning Grant, and as part of that process you have to talk to Natural England. We'll also ask you to provide a map of the proposal area. It doesn't need to be detailed, just like an area if it's a field. And once that information is received through the inbox and sent to the area team, we will reply to you directly and say when we expect to respond by. Next slide, please, Jo. So we'll first run some desk-based checks. So we will look at information on our mapping systems before we will give you a ring or an email to try and arrange a site visit. We might bring a colleague along who knows the area. We also might talk to a Forestry Commission if you've been engaged with them to see if the woodland officer is available to come out to just have a look at the site, see what's there. We can identify any opportunities that we might not see initially from maps. So there might be an area of existing mature woodland next to the site, which is a really good opportunity to link up existing habitat, but it can also provide a seed source, and there could be some evidence that trees are naturally growing in your field from this adjacent woodland, which is really positive because it's not only a very cost-effective way of establishing a woodland, you get trees from a genetic local source, and they're more connected to their mother tree, which means they're more likely to thrive and establish in the long run. So we'll also look in the vicinity for whether the habitat that was on our maps matches what is there in reality. So if there's any existing environmental considerations such as like rarer habitats or protected species, we might see them, and I will go over next about like what that might mean for a scheme. So following a site visit, we will provide a response outlining the opportunities of a scheme in that location and potential constraints of a new woodland there. So yeah, this brings us on to the 5 Ps. So these are 5 very broad areas of natural England's interest and potential conflict with woodland, but they can also present really good opportunities to get like really high wildlife value schemes. So these are briefly peatlands, priority habitats, so that's a species rich wildflower meadow there, protected sites, priority species, for the twitchers in the group, that's a curlew, which is a ground nesting bird, and public access. Next slide, please. So the first one is protected or designated sites. The most common of these is called SSSIs, sites of special scientific interest. They're the most frequent. There's also special protected areas, which are areas designated specifically for migratory birds, special areas of conservation, SACs, which are more focused on important habitats, Ramsar sites, which are focused on wetlands. It's important that we consider possible impacts on statutorily protected sites, and some of them you can see on the screen here. That's the Severn Estuary, which is a SAC, an SPA, a SSSI and a Ramsar, because it's so important for migratory birds and has migratory fish and important habitats like mudflats. So protected sites can be positively or negatively impacted by planting trees on or near them. So we assess each case by case. Some might benefit from increased tree cover in proximity, say if they've got woodland as part of their designation. They could also be suffering from a lot of tree loss, such as ash dieback, and perhaps the site is isolated from other similar habitats, and a new woodland might join existing areas or provide a corridor for wildlife to move along and increase the resilience of that woodland to climate extremes and diseases. So some protected sites might be negatively impacted by woodland establishment and some types of tree planting. They can, for example, dry out peat soils. They can alter the water tables of wetlands and cause the plants to dry out. Some non-native timber trees, such as Sitka spruce, spread really easily onto neighbouring land. So if you're next to a really species-rich meadow, you won't, you know, Sitka spruce might not be the best thing to plant. They can also create really dense shade and shade out any like interesting ground flora. And the other thing to mention is woodlands can increase predator pressure. You've got basically creating new habitat for things like foxes and badgers, which are amazing animals, but they can put pressure on our ground nesting bird populations if the woods are situated in the wrong place, say near the Severn Estuary, for example. Next slide, please, Jo. So that brings me on to 2 more Ps, priority habitats and priority species. Priority habitats are semi-natural habitats identified as being the most threatened and requiring conservation action. They're sometimes rare habitats or ones that have drastically declined, particularly in the last 20 years, or habitats that support threatened and important species. We'll always try to visit the site because it's not all of our priority habitats are mapped, and also not all the ones we have mapped are correct either. So these are just a few pictures of some priority habitats we have in the southwest. So heathlands in the top left, they support lots of priority species of reptiles, snakes, lizards, that's an adder, and they have been lost in particular in the last 50 years because of afforestation of conifer plantations. So there's not many of them left. So in the southwest, we're famous for chalk and limestone grasslands. I'm thinking of like Salisbury Plain, and species-rich grassland and meadows in the UK have declined 97% since the 1930s because they've been improved with agricultural intensification or ploughed and reseeded, lots of other things, but they support an amazing range of insects and invertebrates, such as the blue Adonis butterfly. Wetlands, so that's a fen in the Somerset levels. They're often, wetlands can be on peat, they're very wet. Exmoor, Dartmoor in the Somerset levels, sometimes not the most obvious place for trees, but you do get some opportunities to create wet woodland or some scrub. And that's a lapwing there, which is a ground nesting wading bird. Another wetland type is the chalk rivers, hugely important priority habitat in the south and southwest. Woodland and trees in the catchment can actually help chalk rivers become more resilient to climate change by better regulating hydrology, so more resilient against droughts and floods, and they shade the channel to keep the water cool. If there is priority habitat on or near your sites, it's not necessarily going to be a no for trees altogether, but it might influence the woodland design, possibly the tree species and the method of woodland establishment. So the key message is, by engaging with Natural England early, we can help identify and assess if there is anything important there or threatened species, and consider like what options there are before giving some pragmatic advice. Forestry Commission have ecologists too. They check sites, and new woodland which is going to negatively impact any priority habitats or species won't be compliant with the UK forestry standard. So you won't be able to access funding on incentives for tree planting if it's going to negatively impact those habitats. There are likely to be incentives in the future with Environment Land Management Scheme for landowners for priority habitat and species. Next slide, please. Thanks, Joe. So peat soils, we have a lot of peat in the southwest. Raised bogs on Dartmoor, Bodmin, Exmoor. We have fens in the Somerset levels. We also have loads of degraded peat below vast swathes of Somerset, but also across Dorset and in the river valleys of Wiltshire, we have soil with peaty pockets. Some are still in good condition, but many are degraded because of drainage, overgrazing, or being planted on historically. I think that's Dartmoor with conifers in the background. And it's worth noting that when those were planted, we didn't really appreciate how important peat was for storing carbon. A peat layer of 30 centimetres has the carbon store equivalent to tropical rainforests. So it's really important that we protect them, and planting trees with deep roots basically dries them out. They need to be permanently wet. So you're planting your timber tree, and even though you get your carbon stored in that tree, it's going to release a lot more than it stores. So if you are lucky enough to have deep peat on your land, or peat on your land, there is the peat action plan also that was released at the same time as the tree action plan. There are grants available to restore peatlands. Next slide, please. So the final of the P's is public access. So local authorities deal with footpaths, rights of way, but Natural England lead on what's called open access land. So the Countryside and Rights of Way Act in 2000 gives a public right of access to land mapped as open country, which is mountain, moor, heath and down, or registered common land. It's also coastal margin, which is all the land between the England Coast Path Trail and the sea. So essentially that rounds up the 5 Ps. If there are any on your site, it is worth talking to TAPD and emailing that mailbox at the earliest possible stage to see like how we can make the scheme work. It's definitely not necessarily like a blocker. It's just as early as we know, we can give advice and avoid you being disappointed if certain things can't happen. But we really want to see trees in the landscape, and we're very open to all sorts of schemes. And that just gives me one more slide, I think, Joe. So yeah, to wrap up, I wanted to highlight another option, a government-backed scheme that Natural England runs. The England Woodland Creation Offer funds a certain density of woodland, which might not necessarily fit in with your farm plan. There's also some limit on how much grazing you can have below trees, although there's some exceptions made, but UCO wasn't designed to have cattle grazing beneath it. So countryside stewardship higher tier schemes can fund wood pasture creation, as well as other forms of treed habitat such as scrub and traditional orchard. TACTI can also provide you more information about how these could work on your farm to allow you to maintain some flexibility, whether that's with tree grazing or whether you want more large open grown trees and fields. It could be a good option for you. So there's at least one more round of countryside stewardship next year, and higher tier schemes for wood pasture and for traditional orchard are funded for 10 years. And in the absence, regrettable absence of information about Environment Land Management Scheme, which is going to replace countryside stewardship, it can offer some certainty for farms, as can UCO for the next 10 years. So yeah, that's pretty much all for me. It was a quick canter through, but I'll hand back to Joe now. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rihanna. That's great and good to hear Natural England's support and understand where you can come into the picture. Really great. I was out on site last week with a TACTI advisor, somebody who was trying to work out which route to go down, whether it's a woodland creation planning grant or to go straight into UCO, and it was a really productive meeting, and we had one of Rihanna's colleagues there, and we were able to have benchmark some of the grassland and actually have a look to see if any surveys were required with that Natural England support in place. So we are working really closely together with Natural England as well as other organisations. So I just want to take you through kind of what the next steps is before we have a look at some of the questions that you've put up. So kind of going away from this webinar this evening, hopefully you'll have had an overview of kind of the grants, the Forestry Commission grants that are there, and helping you to understand your landscape a little bit better. There's a lot more detail as you go through the application process. So it is making sure that you engage with Natural England early on if you are in a sensitive landscape, as Rihanna highlighted, but it's also worthwhile speaking to one of our woodland officers who's in your area, because they can support you through that application process. But also we can signpost you to a delivery partner, we call them, another organisation who's supporting with woodland creation, whether that's West Country Rivers Trust or Woodland Trust. We can get you that support in place to help with your application and to do site visits. So we're trying to provide that all-encompassing service and bringing all advisors from all organisations together around woodland creation. And we're not just promoting Forestry Commission grants, we are trying to signpost you to the most appropriate grant depending on your woodland type. I think one of the questions in the chat, I think if we move on to those, let me I'll take Rihanna off and you can see me now instead. I think somebody in one of the chats has asked whether if there's grants available for under 1 hectare. So there is the option with UCO to do joint applications, but there are other NGO organisations who do offer tree planting under 1 hectare. Woodland Trust offer significantly discounted trees. and can help you with that. There's other organisations like the Wildlife Trust, Cornwall Wildlife Trust and Devon Wildlife Trust, and they offer smaller areas, smaller amounts of trees for even smaller pockets of trees. If you're unsure about who's working in your area and where you can access, you can get in contact and we'll be able to provide links and contacts for those people, which I think can be really helpful. If I can just scroll my screen, because I can't, for some reason, it won't let me going up and down the questions for some reason. Rihanna, can you see any of the questions there?
Yeah, I can see them in the chat. If you clicked on the Q&A.
Yeah, I have, but it won't let me scroll up and down. Are you okay to pose a few of the questions to me? And then
yeah, of course. Yeah, I was just typing a reply to one, but I can definitely do that. Yeah.
Do you want to do that? And we'll spend the next sort of 15-20 minutes trying to address some of the questions that people have posed.
Yeah, of course. So I will go with, what is available after 10 years and what are the tax implications?
So the UCO agreement, you're in an obligation period for 15 years, and then it's down to you. But if you're planting a woodland, it is classed as a permanent land use change. So you do need to think carefully about where your trees are going to go, because trees are long term. But it's also worthwhile to note, and I think there's been some confusion as well, because there's a lot of concern about whether we're going to be planting on productive land. Within the scheme, we don't give grants for planting on grade 1 or grade 2 productive land, because we recognise that food security is really important. Though you can incorporate maybe some buffer strips of trees or shelter belts within that land, and particularly on grade 3. So we're very conscious that land is really important, whether it's for biodiversity or for food production. In terms of tax, I'll have to get back to you what happens after year 10. The woodland's yours, so I will find out for you and let you know on that one.
Would you like another question?
That would be lovely. Thank you, Rihanna.
So Glyn has asked, would the 2,800 a hectare be payable if it is planted next to scrub? So I think that's regarding the biodiversity payment, that to get that, like, you know, higher payments. And
so this option is really great. So you need to check on the Forestry map browser, and I will send the link out in the next couple of days to you, so you can actually see what payments you're eligible for. Now, if even a small bit of your parcel where you're creating that native broadleaf woodland is in that parcel, the whole parcel is eligible, because it is creating that connectivity to an existing woodland. So you need to initially check on that forestry map browser if you're eligible. And that will guide. I will say with that biodiversity payment, there is a little bit of a sort of, I suppose, prescription, because we want native woodlands to be planted, but it doesn't mean to say you can't plant conifer within that native woodland. But we expect 80% of that woodland to be native trees, but you're allowed 20% conifer within that woodland, because conifers again offer real benefits to woodlands. We know they sequester initially carbon much quicker than a broadleaf, though longer term native trees will sequester much more carbon. So it depends on your vision for your woodland. And again, scrub and small trees are really important. and we require that a certain percentage, 30% of those trees are smaller trees or scrubby type trees like hawthorn and hazel, because they are really important for biodiversity. So if you're looking at natural regen, though, you do have to be within 75 metres of a seed source, because you need the seeds for the trees to actually grow on your own. So you don't even have to do any planting. You can just say, I'm going to let this field do its own thing for the next 10-15 years and let the natural seeds create your woodland. But you do have to be next to a seed source, and a seed source being a mature tree, a mature seed bearing tree, and that can be in an existing woodland or it could be in a hedgerow. But again, there's a process to go through if you're looking at that natural recolonisation route. So first of all, it's checking first on the Forestry map browser to see where you are within that layer, and then secondary is looking at about whether you want to do natural recolonisation or plant a native woodland to access that payment. And a lot of areas, I've done quite a lot of mapping work on sites and do farm audits, and a lot of people are within that spatial layer, either the higher one or the lower one, and it can add up quite significantly, that biodiversity additional contribution.
And it only has to be touching the sort of like the blobs. Yeah, it doesn't have to all be within that area. If it's touching it, we know it's going to join onto an important area, so it all counts.
Absolutely. And if you've got a neighbouring parcel as well, that you're creating a native woodland in, and it's next to a parcel that is touching that biodiversity layer, that parcel will actually count as well for that biodiversity payment, because it is increasing that connectivity. So it's a really generous payment for biodiversity.
I was going
Brilliant.
to ask, yeah, this question sort of is linked in a way, I think, and it's a bit of a tricky one, but Simon has asked, please can you explain how to make the most soil carbon sequestration and tree planting combined to maximise CO2 drawdown?
Yeah, really good question, and it's something that Forest Research are doing quite a lot of research into, and it's ongoing. Conifer woodlands sequester carbon much quicker than broadleaf on the short term, and short term is still quite long term in terms of the life of trees, but we're looking sort of 30-40 years. So if you're looking at that initial, I want to sequester as much as I can in that initial stage of a life, I would go for conifer. But if you're thinking much longer term, I would definitely go for broadleaf. But if that's your only aim, it's worthwhile getting somebody out to actually have a look. Yeah, I think go Rihanna. You can add in there.
I was going to say, I think Simon is on something here, because he mentions specifically soil carbon sequestration, and I think definitely conifers, they grow faster, they store carbon quickly in the tree. But as far as storing carbon in the soils, I think there's a growing amount of evidence that native broadleaves, and particularly using natural colonisation as a method of establishment, is a very good way to increase those soil mycorrhizae, because you're connecting to parent trees and the sort of fungal network is already established. So I think as we go on and we do more and more studying of these sort of ways of establishing woodland, I think it's an incredibly powerful way, and also you get that successive build up of carbon from being deciduous trees, like year on year, like the leaf build up. So it's just, trees are good for everything. Different types of woodlands, they work on different time scales, but still can both be incredibly beneficial for carbon sequestration.
Yeah, definitely. And there's still a lot of work to be done around carbon, whether it's soil carbon or even carbon within a grassland, to see how much it's sequestering. And I know there's lots of people, including Forest Research, who are investigating this. And what we hope to publish is in the next year, 2 years, some case studies about carbon sequestration. And there's all sorts of toolkits that are emerging to be able to calculate carbon, but it's a complex area to understand when you're looking at whole ecosystems. So yeah, the Woodland Carbon Code as well, they've got a calculator where you put all your information in there, tree species, etc. And again, we've got people who are experts within the Forestry Commission about soil carbon and also carbon in trees to help make sure that you're selecting the right trees for the right purpose, and also bearing in mind as well the impact as we see temperatures increase over the next couple of decades.
So I've got a question from Joanne Lee. Can I use land already designated as woodland but has no trees on it? I think we might have to get a bit more information on that to answer, because yeah, whether it's if you mean designated as in protected, or whether it used to have woodland on it and doesn't anymore, maybe send us an email afterwards and we can give you some more information about that. Joanne, and she's also asked, is this per annum, which I think was when we were talking about the additional contributions.
Yeah, it's a one-off lump sum, so the additional contributions are all like a one-off payment, but again it's a really nice lump sum that you'll be in receipt of once you've got your woodland planted, which can support your business. It can support if you're thinking about a large scheme. I know people are using some of that additional contribution to help to pay a bit of the agent's fees if you decide to employ a forest agent or a land agent to help with your application process. I know if it is a large scheme, people are preferring to go down that route. But it's there for you to use how you will, but it is that one-off payment in there.
And then there's the annual payment of maintenance payment at £300 per hectare for the first 10 years.
Yeah,
got it.
I was about to say as well, Rhiannon, it's worthwhile to know, I know it's a really complex landscape at the minute and there's quite a bit of uncertainty about elms and the detail that's going to come through, and what we're understanding at the moment, the UCO offer will form part of elms when it is rolled out. So we're expecting that the payments under elms for woodland creation will remain similar, but well, hopefully in the next year or so we will, fingers crossed, we will see a bit more detail come out as various aspects are rolled out.
Yeah. So we've got an anonymous question saying, what type of income do you expect woodlands to make after 10 years? So that's quite a complicated answer, I think.
It is, and again, there's not a definite answer on that because it depends on your objective. I mean, you could, if you're planting, you're thinking actually I want to produce a timber crop, you could produce quite large incomes from that timber production. We know the price of timber is going up, and timber is always a really buoyant market out there. We are pulling together because we know this is an area that people will want a little bit more detail on. So we are pulling case studies, financial and economic case studies together. So you can see what establishment costs are and what the likely income is going to be from timber and from carbon. And in time, we're hoping that we'll have a toolkit that actually can calculate potential returns from a woodland if it is sort of focused around timber and carbon production.
I guess it's also it's tricky to put a price on how much like strategically planned woodland in your farm can actually save your business, in terms of if we have those extreme weather events on saving all of your topsoil disappearing into the nearby ditch or stream, and those, yeah, your shelter for your animals during those extreme events. Not to mention you can get your own timber supply for your, you know, wood boilers or wood burners in your houses. You've got hedgerow fruits and hedgerow products. There's also, Jo mentioned in her slides, all of the sort of additional income streams of having access on your land and having recreation, and having like you can directly sell your products to people using your woodland. So there's just endless opportunities, in my opinion, for trees on farms.
Yeah, there is, and we're trying to as well to build a network of peer support of landowners, farmers who've created woodlands, and we've got a number of people on there already. One person, Sam Watmore's created, not under UCO, he did it under the old schemes. He's converted a lot of his farm to woodland, and now 20 years on, he's making income from that woodland through a whole variety of means. So if you'd like to talk to somebody who's
Jo? Not sure if this is just frozen for everyone else or just for me. If anyone's still out there and feels like posting something in the Q&A to say whether you can still see Jo, it's sort of frozen for me. But if you can't see her but you can hear me, post something and I will. Oh yeah, just post something and say if it's just me on the screen. Okay, well, it's just a Rihanna show now. Thanks, Simon. I just got your message, so that's great. Thank you. I will. Jo does sometimes have a bit of a dodgy line, so I will just continue and try and answer them on her behalf, because I know quite a bit now about Forestry Commission schemes. So I was looking here at Charles. You said, this is a difficult one that I can't answer, but it says, are the maintenance payments inflation adjusted over a 10-year period? So I'm not sure about that. I will make sure that we get an answer for you. It's obviously very topical at the moment with the just rate of inflation. So I'm not sure if there's a decision on that. I know they've just increased it from £200 a hectare to £300 a hectare maintenance, which is hopefully quite attractive, but yeah, I appreciate that it still might not be enough for people. So we've got our mature hedges eligible. They capture masses of carbon and seem to have be undervalued generally, but have huge potential. Yeah, I think that is there is potential for planting sort of strips of trees. So in the UCO manual, it says 20-metre strips is sort of the minimum, but I think there's a bit of flex in UCO and we can go down to 10 metres. So essentially like really big hedgerows. And yes, I definitely recognise they're incredibly important for wildlife and culturally significant as well. So thanks for that, Jonathan. Sally says, Jo, you're saying you're live. Can you hear me?
For some reason it chucked me out for some reason. So.
It was dramatic. I was there being like, is it just me or is it Jo's gone? But yeah. Shall I give you another question?
Yeah, I think I'll do one more and then we'll call it close. But if we've not answered your question, we'll responses, and we'll send that round in an email as long with it, with the recording and any resources as well. So
yeah, there is an absolute tranche of questions here that just been added, so thank you everyone. It said someone has mentioned at the bottom, could we mention the community forests of well, the southwest, and that is a really definitely something we should mention, that England Woodland Creation offer is sort of open to anyone across England, but we are really lucky to have several community forests in the southwest. In my area we have the Forest of Avon Trust and the Great Western Community Forest. I think we've got the Forest of Cornwall, is that right? And one more.
Forest of Plymouth.
Of course. So yeah, they can offer different schemes, similar sort of to UCO, but they have more flexibility in terms of the trees they can supply, and also the densities. They can go for a lower density planting. So if you are thinking more of like agroforestry, then it might be a better option for you. And it's worthwhile saying that community forests are really focused on public access. So if that's something that sounds like you'd be up for, then they will be biting your hand off for the opportunity.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rihanna. Yeah, the community forests are brilliant. We've done a few events with community forests, and certainly in Cornwall they're really active, and they have actually secured some extra funding down in Cornwall to look at some pilot agroforestry projects. So if you are in Cornwall, get in contact with me, and I can link you up with the advisors there. And again, I can link you up with people in the Forest of Avon and Plymouth as well, community forest, if that's where you'd like to go down. We want to be one face for woodland creation, all the organisations, so you are getting the best support and the best advice from the right people. Brilliant. I think we'll end it there. We're nearly on 8 o'clock, but I hope everybody has found that really useful. We have covered a lot in the hour and a half, but we will be sending out resources, etc., as I've mentioned, sort of post-event. But do get back to me once I've sent those resources out, and we can link you up to the right people in your area to help you progress onto the next stage. We will be running farm workshops as well. We're just kind of developing a programme. So if you want to hear about a bit more or to meet us face to face as well, we'll give you notification of when and where they are happening. But it's great to have everybody here tonight and your support, and I hope it's provided a little bit of information to help you on your journey. So thank you, Rihanna. That's been great. Thank you for your input. I think we'll be doing some more of these, making a good team. But thank you all, and I hope you have a good rest of the evening. Many thanks. Bye.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Jo.